Hello and welcome to our little tutorial on data validation rules. So as mentioned in a different tutorial, sometimes the easiest way to get past having to clean up data is to make sure that the data goes in properly in the first place. And we'll do a quick example with this little address database right here. Again, I'm just going to adjust a column width, and what I'm interested in is making sure that people type in the province code as just the proper two-letter provincial code. Now, if you're dealing with people of different age groups, you might find that some people use AB for the province. Other people use ALTA, A-L-T-A, and there are still plenty of people who still insist on writing out Alberta in full. Now, if you have those combinations of things in your database, three different ways to refer to the province, you'll find that sorting and filtering and all those sorts of things gets to be kind of an aggravation. So you want to make sure your data is as uniform as possible. And the easiest thing to do is just follow the codes that Canada Post uses. So there are a couple different ways to build in validation rules, and what validation rules is they basically force the person doing data input to input the data in a specific way. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take out AB for now. I'll just delete it. And what I want to do is I want to come in and I want to apply a validation rule to all of these empty cells that will make the person doing data input only be able to put in the data in a specific way. So to do that, I click on my Data tab. I come along here to this button called Data Validation, and I give it a click, and it brings up the wizard for creating a data validation rule. So it's three sections: settings, input message, and error alert. Under settings, I'm going to say, well, you know what? I want this to only be a specific text length, and I don't want it to be between anything. I want it to be equal to 2 characters. And then I can go OK. Now, if I want to go ahead and do that, now what you'll find is if I type in, let's say, Alberta, and I tap my Enter key, it says the value doesn't match the validation restrictions defined for this cell, which really doesn't make any sense to most normal people. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cancel this, and I'm going to go in and I'm going to make a couple changes so that the feedback to anyone violating the data validation rule will make a little bit more sense. So I'm going to go and click data validation one more time. I do have text length equal to 2. I'm going to leave that alone, but I'm going to add an input message, and it will say, the title of it will be province code, and the input message will say, please use only the 2-letter provincial code abbreviation. That may not make much more sense than the original message that we got. I could, of course, kind of work with my wording to make it even simpler, but that seems to be okay for now. The other thing I'll do is I'll set up an error alert. And what an error alert does is it's a second message that the user gets if they violate the rule. The input message actually pops out as soon as you click on a cell. It kind of gives you a reminder, but it's the error alert that really, prevents you from doing anything else until you make the correction. Now it's set to be stop. If I click the down arrow, there's a warning and information. These two allow some flexibility. They allow you to put in other data. So stop is the most restrictive. That's kind of what you want to make people, you want to prevent them from entering data any other way than you want them to put it in. So in this case, the title will be hey you, and the error message will be, what did I just tell you? Exclamation point. Use only the 2-letter abbreviation. Now, if I go ahead and I click OK, you'll see that the input message is right there. If I go to that cell and I type in Alberta and I tap my enter key, that's when I get this message. By the way, don't use a message like this. It's far too rude and you'll probably get yelled at for using it. You can be a little more, a little more diplomatic, but still be quite strict. So in this case, I cancel, and it gives me the opportunity to put in the proper code. And if I put in the proper code, then everything works just fine. Now, in an instance like that, I probably, before I create the data validation rule, want to select perhaps that entire column with the exception of the province code. So in our next example, we'll show you a slightly different way of putting in the province codes. But this time around, we'll apply it to all the cells in the column except for F1. So first things first, I'm going to go back to the data validation. I'm going to go back to my settings. And in fact, I'm going to go clear all. I'm just going to get rid of that rule completely. So you'll see that all of this is now empty. In this instance, what I want to do, I'm going to go ahead and OK it. And I will even clear this out. I'm just going to delete it. So what I want to do is I want to make sure that I apply my data validation rule to all the cells here. So I'm going to go and click on F, and that way this rule goes from this cell all the way to the end of the sheet. But you'll also notice it's capturing this one. I don't want that because it will simply violate the rule I'm about to make. So what I do is I hold down my control key and I click where it says Prov, and that deselects it but leaves all the cells beneath it. I can scroll for miles from here, but take my word for it, the entire rest of the column is selected. This time around, I'm going to go and I'm going to make a validation rule. And this time, the validation rule is in fact going to come from a list. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in the short codes for the provinces. BC, AB, SK, MB. And I can do this all by hand. And at this point, I should also let you know, I don't know all the codes, so that makes it kind of a problem. However, for the sake of this example, I'm going to complete it, but I'll show you another way that we can quickly get all of the codes and still use a list. But for now, I'm just going to continue just to show that you can manually input your data separated by commas, and the list will work perfectly well. So the same thing, I'll go to the input message. I'll be a little bit shorter on this one. Please use 2-letter code from drop-down list. An error, again, I won't be as rude this time. A friendly reminder. Please use only the choices on the drop-down list. I might even tell people to only click on the choices because you don't know what experience level your data input folks are doing. So if I go ahead and click OK, it gives me that information, but now what I can do is I have a choice. I can either type in AB, which is fine, or if I'm putting in an address somewhere else, I can click the down arrow and I can actually go from the list. Again, if someone comes in and types in British Columbia, the warning will pop up. They get a chance to retry, and they can either, in this case, type in BC, and it'll let it through, or again, if the arrow pops up, they can select it from the list. Once again, I'm going to come along in here, and I'm going to take a step back. Now, if I knew all the provincial codes, I could have typed them in and everything would have been perfect. But what I'm going to do is I will take a step back here. I'm going to come along to this column. I am going to click on validation rules, and it says, do you want to extend to these cells? I'm going to say no. So I'm going to come back here. I'll cancel. Let's do the control click once again. Go back to my data validation. And I'm going to clear all the rules. I'll OK it, and I will delete these. You'll see that there's no longer any drop-down arrows, so the rule is gone. I will highlight them and I will delete them. So, back here, I have a tab here called Postal Codes. And just so you know, I'm going to add a sheet here and just show you what I did to get those postal codes. I did a Google search, but I actually put the link right over here. So I'm going to go and click on the link, give it a second or two, and it basically takes me out to the Stats Can page, which has all these codes. The problem is I really can't come in here very easily and highlight just that column. So what I ended up doing was I highlighted this whole thing, because luckily it's a table, and remember, tables are, a rose is a rose is a rose. So as long as it's in tabular format here, Excel will really like it. So if I come back to Excel, I'm going to come back to this sheet. I'm going to do a Control V to paste it in. And in that instance, that went a little bit sideways. After I click the link and arrive at this page, I'm going to go and I'm going to highlight the table, because it really doesn't make it very easy for me to just grab that column. So I'm going to go and highlight the entire table. Actually, I'm going to leave that source line out of here. And I don't even have to be, that accurate with it, because it's only this column I want to take. So I'm going to go ahead and Control C to copy it to my Excel sheet. I'm going to click here, and I'll go Control V. And what I'm going to find is that it puts the entire table in, but in turn I'm going to just kind of get rid of the stuff that I don't need. So I'm going to highlight these two columns, right click, and I will delete them. The same idea, I'll click and drag through the letters representing the columns, and I will get rid of those two. I'll just a right click and delete. And then I'm left with my list. And I could, of course, widen out the column and give this a little more room. And I could also kind of drag up the row to make it a little bit nicer. So that, in essence, is what I did on this postal code sheet. Same idea. So what we'll do in this instance is kind of similar to what we did in the previous example. I'm going to go ahead and highlight the entire column and then do the Control click, and I'll go back up to the data validation button and give that a click as well. I'm going to go back to settings. I'm going to choose list, except this time around for the source I'm going to click on this little button, and what that will allow me to do is go over to the postal codes tab, highlight the cells within it, and you'll see that it'll take it from the postal code sheet and it's looking at that column of cells. And then I just go click this button a second time. I can go ahead and drop in an input message once again. So as we did previously, please use codes from drop down list, or from drop down. I could also say please use codes from list, and I'll go please use only the codes from the drop down list. Click the little arrow to see them, then click the one you want. A little bit wordy, but maybe a little bit simpler. And the error alert again will be, please use only the list. Only the 2-letter codes in the list are allowed. And we'll go OK. You get the initial input message, but now if you click the down arrow, you get not only the codes, but you have a scroll bar to make sure that you can see all the codes. And once again, that validation rule is applicable to almost every cell in that column. It's leaving that one up top alone. Now, the reason I like going this route is because not only is it going to draw from this list, but you could have an entire sheet with a whole bunch of different lists of variables or pieces of data that you will use over and over and over. You can also turn around. In fact, if you have a bunch of data here that you don't necessarily want the people inputting data to see, you could go ahead, right-click on the tab, and hide the entire sheet. I'll even hide this one as well. And in an instance like that, people can still use these perfectly well. The validation rule is still going to work. So they're perfectly fine. Except where it is drawing its information from is hidden. There will be times where you do need to hide data from your users of your workbook, just so they don't mess things up. Now, if for whatever reason you needed to go back and edit that list or any of the things on that hidden page, you could always right-click and click unhide. And if I wanted to bring my postal codes back, I can just simply make sure they're selected and click OK. So just to wrap this up, and just to make sure that this address looks okay, I'm going to go and make sure that I pop in AB.